So what's up, guys? September 1st, right? It may not officially be fall, autumn, but as a kid and now, I was never really a summer guy. Never really dug the summers. Never liked how it got too hot to do things and muggy and all that stuff. And I was really cantankerous as a kid because I was the only kid I knew like that, and I'm one of the few people I still know that are like that. But being that cantankerous kind of guy really sort of opened myself up to discovering a lot of great things as a kid and stuff, right? Anytime something felt like it was mainstream, I guess, or everybody was into it, I was sort of out. I always sort of like to look out for the new things. I always like to find out what was coming next. This really paid off, like with discovering bands and music and stuff. I was listening to Green Day and things like that 6 months before they came out, telling people about you need to check this band out and things like that. But when it pertained to comics, a little bit ahead of the curve sometimes. Just because when everybody was reading X Men, the last thing I wanted to read was X Men. Now, monetarily, not a big deal. Never really got into that when I was a kid, trying to find those key books and stuff. I just wanted something cool to read. I wanted a cool artist. I wanted to just enjoy myself with this. But one of the things that sort of is that came out of that is not only did I meet people and friends and things like that because of collecting comics, or they were into comics and getting out there and looking for trades or people selling stuff, but sometimes the comics kind of end up becoming like old friends. Last couple months during all this quarantine and everything, I got an app that I've talked about many times and started cataloging my comics, and really, ended up making these stacks of stuff I want to read and reread and things. And I'd have to like move forward, put these things up. But I got a little box here and grabbed a few things here that these comics. It's really odd to be in 2020 and realize that there's people who, a lot of people who really don't read their comics. They're more into the covers and the keys and the grades and stuff like that. But to sit down and actually read these as a kid and have your mind blown and have to wait a month or discover them and stuff it was really wild. Hopefully there's not a glare on here. But anyway, this actual book, this Justice League number 195, is a book that I have had in my collection for quite a while, because I was probably in the fourth grade, I'm guessing, third or fourth grade. And there's some older kids, and when I was walking through this little coal mine in town, it was literally on top of a mountain, and it was one road going across up the mountain. And then when you get into where everybody lived, it was probably like it's still up there. It was about it's called Jewel Ridge, Virginia. There's probably like, I would guess 3 or 4 miles where you just drive and it's just houses beside of each other. And it's one road. But I saw these older kids sitting at a on a park bench. It would have to be at the school, the elementary school they had up there, or in the actual park that they have. And I saw a stack of books, so I went up there and started talking to them. They were, when you're, probably 9 or 10 years old. And I think they were like about 13. And the guy his name ended up being Mike Kessner. And I ended up trading him some books for this Teen Titans number, I don't know what they were, 13 and 14. That's that had the Doom Patrol story in it. And it was just really cool to do this. Now, of course, I've got the upgrade here, but I had to finish this story. And this story here is, of course, it is a Justice Society, Justice League, Earth 1 and Earth 2 story and crossover, but it just blew my mind to get in here. Now, there's a lot of love with this, right? There's pencil marks on it. I can rub my finger in there. I mean, they crossed them out. They kind of ruined the story because they were completing what what heroes got took out. But I was going through this, and this may have been the first time I really noticed George Perez. Now, I'd already been reading comics and stuff, but now we're getting into that time of the more modern stuff, not my stepdad and uncle's comics and stuff left over from the 70s and everything, which was all good. But seeing these Earth 2 characters, this is probably what made me an Earth 2 fan, seeing these villains. But it was this this spread right here that just blew my mind. I studied this, I looked at this, I was comparing who was on what side and were they counterparts, and I was getting little stories in my head and trying to figure out who they were. I recognized a lot of these guys from All-Star Squadron already, don't get me wrong, but these were the 80s. This was them in the 80s, not in World War II. So it just completely blew me away. Floronic Man, Brainwave Jr., the Monocle, the Mist. All these guys ended up becoming players along the way, just about. The Mist, of course, in Starman in the 90s with James Robinson. Brainwave Jr., played a part in Stargirl. Floronic Man ended up a little bit later being a huge player. And then the Ultra Humanite. Now, that's the thing. I can sit here and tell you all about this story and these characters. I would end up picking these up over the years to finish the story. It lit a whole new fire in me to start really trying to track some of these books down. So for a while there, I was grabbing whatever I could. And I can still pick up this book, know the story back and forth, and I was always into the villains. So this is really a story that's front and center, the villains. The Ultra Humanite has remained there. So probably about a year later, if I'm remembering right, I should have looked up, let me see what year this was, since I'm all talking here. Oh, good grief, 1981. 81, so I was younger than that. I was about 9 years old. But it was with this book a year later that, like I said, I was already kind of sort of reading the All-Star Squadron when I could. But it was with these guys. I got to see this, the crime syndicate, these evil versions of the heroes, and these floating head layouts and the frame within a frame. And it was me being able to get the change. At this time, I'd have to go through the couch and through the laundry that was stacked up in the bathroom, a little pyramid of clothes, and I'd get my money because they were 60 cents back then. So it was nothing to go through the laundry about once a week, and then I would sneak off and walk to the store, or I would catch a ride, like, are you going to the grocery store, Mom? Things like that. So I could get this, and I was starting to understand. So it was in around 82, I believe, that I turned around and realized this is when I was a collector. This is when I was looking around my room. I had stacks of books that I had traded for and I'd gotten, and these just blew me away. Extra feature, Masters of the Universe. It was all about He-Man back then. G.I. Joe was starting to spring up. So this little crossover here just blew my mind. Here's the actual original book, I think, that I had. Read and reread these where they're starting to disintegrate. So, this series here, this little crossover, Crosses on Earth Prime, really had a huge effect on me, knowing I was collecting. And then, of course, this is 4th grade. Now we're in it and stuff, right? But these George Perez covers, Earth 1 and Earth 2. I'd already been a little bit of a Starman fan and stuff, thanks to All-Star Squadron. But again, these are the Earth 2 characters in modern times. And I bought and rebought these, and of course they were explaining some continuity that went back to the 60s with blew my, with the Earth 2 versions of these characters. I was all about Earth 1 and Earth 2. I loved the whole concept of two worlds of superheroes. I mean, I completely understood it. Those are the upgrades, but probably I have multiple copies. Yeah, this is an original, but I read and reread these, and they were just fantastic. I could still go back and read those. And then, of course, I kept buying the Justice League. We're in 1983, so I'm 10 years old now. Probably getting Batman, the Outsiders, and everything, too. Probably getting about a $5 allowance for stuff. It was probably He-Man toys and candy and a handful of comic books. So I'd always, even back then, I was frugal, if that's a good word. And I would buy team books like the Avengers and Justice League just to make sure that I could get as many heroes as I could. Now, what's great about this time, and I love this idea, this is just a throwaway story where we had like more or less the island of Dr. Maru. Bunch of rich people were turning people into animal hybrids, more or less so they could fight in gladiator tournaments for the wealthy and the rich and stuff, right? So I absolutely love those. And when I go back to those, it's like I said, it's like visiting old friends. There's a couple other series like that, and I've always sort of mentioned them and bragged on them, or it was an ongoing joke about me talking about them and stuff. But another series that was like that was, of course, Atari Force. Video games were in the house. I watched the rise of video games. By this time, we're in 1984. A year before this, at 10 years old, I started playing pool. I had one of my dad's friends teach me how to shoot pool. So it was all about walking to an arcade, and in the 80s, it was shooting pool. And of course, I ended up paying off because when I was about 20, I ended up having to pay 3 months of electric bills, and I was shooting pool, making the money to do that. Now, this series apparently is obviously not in choice, but I love going back to these characters. They just, I look at them, Tempest and Blackjack and all of them, Pack Rat. There's something about these where this definitely is in the era of the X-Men and the era of Star Wars being big. And this is a licensed franchise. But what was cool is Atari, the Atari system and the Atari thing, they didn't really have characters and mascot per se, unless you want to count, I don't know, you can't even really count Mario back then and stuff, right? But the designs of this, and this is where I really started noticing Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And these are super cheap. You can probably find these quarter bins, 50-cent bin, dollar bins. They'll probably be nothing to find these, but they're so underrated and so good. The world building in these, it was free to do whatever they want because Atari Force was just more about the name Atari Foundation. They had a little mini comic books that you could get when you bought certain games for your Atari system. But you know, the nostalgia that these sort of bring and how underrated it is. These make me all warm and fuzzy, and some of these are really beat up, especially this one. But if they, I can't bring myself to send these off to get bound. There's just something about having them like this. But the first year is just gold. Mike Barron, Eduardo Barrito came on in his capable hands, and the mood changed a little bit, but good stuff. Old friends. Now this one we're going to rise up because it's amazing, but from the mid 80s up until about 90, 91, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and apparently and played with older people. And again, it was with old friends. But this particular series right here was the one that caught my eye. We ended up getting more licensed comics, as always, from DC, and TSR came in. And you had Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms, but there was some guy on here, and they were actually written by the people who worked at TSR on the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. But there was something a little special about having a cleric elf and a paladin on the cover fighting some beast, and a guy named Rags Morales coming on there to do this art. Now, of course, like in the Gil Kane cover on the annual there, but this series just really grabbed me because a lot of what I learned is when you had a campaign with D&D, it was all about who you were playing with, in my opinion. So when all the older guys that I was playing with, high school guys in their early 20s, one or two guys in their maybe late 20s, if I had to guess, when things kind of dissolved because life took us in different places, it wasn't just wasn't as much fun when I'd play with other people. Great people, good guys, you just didn't have that chemistry there. But this series just blew me away out of all the series that had come out through the TSR. And again, when I read this, man, it's I'm sitting in my room on a bed, both windows, curtains wide open, my Guns N' Roses picture up on a wall, and I'm just kind of there with a lot of these. And I think I was getting close to be 1990. Yeah, I was a junior probably, but of course, I was reaching that age between 18 and 25 where things sort of changed and stuff. But those are like old friends. But the one where I just want to sit down and I want everything quiet, I want a lamp on, and I want to just go ahead and have everything get sort of quiet there, is Neil Gaiman's Sandman. I saw the advertisements for it, and 1988 maybe, I saw the advertisements for it, And there was no way in the world to get these. You'd have to drive an hour to a comic book shop, and then or to a Walden Books in a Mercer Mall across the state line going into West Virginia. So when I finally did make it there, I grabbed as many of these as I could that were still on spinner rack. And this one right here in particular from 7 Up is where I get the most cozy and comfortable, because you see that UPS. I bought my first Elementals book at the same time that I bought this number 7. And what I did not know is I wanted to keep things mint, and I kind of wondered what to do, but this actually was supposed to peel off. And over 30 some years now, that is not coming off. It's bled through, and it's the only issue I have that's really in rough shape. Because when I got this is the one I believe about the diner, the 24 hours, the infamous one where it's just 24 hours of Dr. Destiny just making people do horrible things to each other for 24 hours in a diner. Really freaked me out. Read and reread it. Is that right? It might also... No, it's not. This is the one where the Dream King gets his stuff back. And there was a particular panel there where this one right here, I am totally wrong. But this is the one where I came in the middle of the story, and this was my first issue of reading old Morpheus and the Sandman. I was like, Dr. Destiny, is that the guy from the Justice League? And I was huge into the cult and still am. But the artwork, the pop art that was in here, the surrealism that they caught so well, blew my little 16-year-old mind, 15, 16-year-old mind. And it's weird, and this is like your weird little friend who's into some dark stuff, but you're there. But this was the panel that just blew me away of how could somebody draw like this. Superhero comics, Avengers, Jack Kirby, George Perez, and then you see this. The textures, the fact that somebody could draw this out of their head just blew my mind. It was just amazing. The other issue I bought the same day as this one, it didn't have the UPS symbol sticker, was the 24-hour diner scene. But this blew me away. Everything changed. Even had a dark Wizard of Oz feel to it. But that's the day that everything had changed. 89. So this is in 1989. I was 16. I can tell by that. But that's just the deal, the thing. It just amazes me how 30 years on, 38 years on, things that I've carried around since I was a kid and I was in high school, that when I see them, it's like I'm picking up right where I left off with an old friend. They're there. I can open them up, be transported a little bit, maybe a little nostalgia, but like I said, it's just like old friends that you pick up right where you left off.